All right, so let's now wind up this case of simple examples by considering an example of a singular perturbation. Now we had already encountered such problems in our work on scaling methods, where we had seen that cases where the small parameter or small group multiplies, let's say, the viscous term, right, or the convective term, that if those effects are lost, you will often lose a boundary condition along with them, or you will be unable to apply a boundary condition. And so that fundamentally changes the nature of the problem. Such problems are called singular perturbations, as opposed to regular perturbations, where if you take epsilon or whatever the small parameter is to 0, it doesn't change the nature of the problem. So for example, when we had done the case of the moving, in fact, right in the beginning, when we had done the case of the oscillating wall, which we had discussed in class, or in your assignment where you had periodic flow inside a pipe, or in the last lecture where we had looked at the diffusion, transient diffusion into an infinite slab, right, or transient diffusion rather into a slab of finite thickness, we saw that we would have conditions under which for early times we basically could have, the diffusion term was so small that you would get an answer saying the concentration doesn't change at all in the domain. However, in all of these problems, if you go to a region sufficiently close to the wall, you could rescale the problem and obtain and get back the effect of the lost term, but within a boundary layer. So such problems that give rise to boundary layers are all singular perturbation problems, and their solution requires often for you to rescale the problem so that you can bring back the effect of the lost term, albeit in a limited region of the problem. So we will see, so basically we had done that already with scaling. We saw in several problems where, let's say, the Peclian number was very large or very small, right? Or the appropriate diffusion time was very large, that we could maybe neglect the effect of diffusion in the bulk, but we would have to account for the effect of diffusion close to the wall, where again the Peclian number can be rescaled to be order 1. Or the appropriate dimensionless group can be rescaled to be order 1 by choosing the boundary layer scale appropriately. So we had left it at that so far, but now we can actually go ahead to solve, we would like to solve those problems again by using perturbation methods. But we would have to be again aware of the fact that those perturbations are singular and have to be treated following a rescale. So anyway, we'll do that in the context of this simple problem. It will become clearer, but I would like you to keep in mind the boundary layer scaling that you had done earlier and the kind of rescaling of the length that you had to do there to obtain the problem within the boundary layer. We'll have to do something similar in this algebraic equation now. Okay, so our example is the following. So it's again a quadratic equation, but this time the small parameter epsilon multiplies the highest power. And you can see now if I take epsilon equal to 0, if epsilon is exactly 0, I just get x equal to 1, right? Just one solution. Right, so this is what I meant by a singular perturbation, or what it means, that the perturbation, or if you take the limit epsilon, if you rather set epsilon equal to 0, not take the limit, if you set epsilon equal to 0, the nature of the problem is fundamentally different from that of the problem where epsilon is finite, although small. Right, so you see here I have only one solution if epsilon is exactly 0, but for any finite value of 0, any finite value of epsilon, no matter how small, I will always have two solutions. So one solution seems to disappear as you set epsilon to 0. So this is a singular perturbation, and it's one where you cannot take the limit smoothly. So by taking epsilon going to smaller and smaller values, I can never really recover the problem of epsilon being set equal to 0, because there's a fundamental difference in this. Something similar happens in our boundary layer problems, where no matter how small the parameter is, there is always some region close to the walls, for example, where the problem shows up, where the nature of the problem shows up again. The nature of diffusion, for example, still plays a role. And so it's never really the same of just saying diffusion is very slow. It's never really the same as saying there is no diffusion, because there's always some boundary region where the fact that there is a finite diffusivity can change the nature of your problem, at least in that region. Okay, so in the context of this example, we want to not only find the rescaling such that we can see that there are two solutions always, but we also want to obtain those solutions in a perturbative manner. And then we'll be able to do the same thing when we encounter boundary layer problems and singular problems in fluid mechanics. Okay, so to get a better idea of what happens to the two solutions and how it becomes one solution when you set epsilon to 0, let's look at the exact solutions of this quadratic equation. So the exact solutions turn out to be, one is 1 minus epsilon plus 2 epsilon square plus order epsilon cube. So you can see that this is the root that survives when I put epsilon to 0. This could be thought of as a regular root because it survives even when epsilon goes to 0. The other root, or the singular root, is as follows. You can just obtain this using the formula and then doing a power series expansion of that using the exact formula for that equations. So you see this root has a dependence that goes as 1 over epsilon. Okay, and so this is the term. So basically you have x1 and let me call it not x1, let's say x1 and x2, the two solutions. And this x2, right, the second solution or the singular solution blows off to infinity as epsilon tends to 0. And this is why you don't see it here when you actually set epsilon to 0. But for any finite value, you will have a second root, but one that's much, much larger than the first root. So this is something to keep in mind. So to be able to obtain the second root for small values of epsilon, we have to rescale the problem such that we go into the regime of the second root, much like how we had to rescale the problem to go close to a wall in a boundary layer situation. Okay, so let's do that. The finding, first of all, if you don't do any rescaling and you will just obtain the first root, right? This is easy enough to see. So if I directly substitute what we had done earlier, let's just take the first term, right, plus epsilon x1. You will get epsilon right, these two terms cancel off as the leading solution at x naught. So you know that x naught is just equal to is equal to 1. And then the solution for x1, which is obtained at order epsilon, so you get one term from here. This is of higher order, this is of higher order, plus x1 is equal to 0, and so x1 is just equal to minus 1. And so the solution to leading order clearly is 1 minus epsilon, and then you'll have other terms, which is what we get. You already know that here. So I can compute the higher order terms in the same way. I won't do that. So now let's look for the singular solution. Right, so to obtain the singular solution which we had lost, we need to rescale the problem. So let's start with the original equations again. Right, and once you recognize the problem is singular, it basically means that you will, because epsilon is small, you're going to lose the effect of this quadratic term. So you need to rescale x such that the quadratic term survives, just the way you had to rescale let's say length, so that the second derivative term involving diffusion, for example, survives in a boundary layer. So to do that, we'll do what we have always done. We write x as some non-dimensional version x tilde or a transform version x tilde times the characteristic scale for x, xc, and we substitute that here. Right? So we're doing the same thing that we've been doing in scaling, although now we don't have physical meanings for this rescaling, but you can see the similarity in the process. So we have epsilon, right, x tilde square, and now this x tilde we take to be order 1, right, and x characteristic holds the magnitude of x. Plus x tilde, again x characteristic, minus 1. Okay, now remember we want to retain, so if you want to retain this term, there are two options, right? You can get xc either from this guy, right? If you say xc now equal to basically 1, so that you can set the coefficient of this to be 1, you get back the original equation, and you will, if you then do perturbation, you will simply get the first solution, right? So this will lead to the regular solution, whose scale is 1 appropriately, because it starts with the regular solution is 1 minus epsilon and so on. So the scale of the regular solution is 1. On the other hand, if you want to retain this term to get the singular solution, let's divide throughout by epsilon xc squared. So then I get x tilde square, which is now guaranteed to survive because it's multiplied by 1. But then the other terms will get multiplied by different coefficients, and from there I can obtain the scale for xc. So this we have upon epsilon xc, because one xc cancels the other, and then you have minus 1 by epsilon xc squared. Okay, now we have two options for xc, right? We can either choose xc from the second term, saying xc is 1 by epsilon, or we can do it here, saying fc is 1 by square root of epsilon. Let's try the first, again, because this is, now we don't have any physical meaning for these terms, so I can't make a physical guess. But even then, you can always try, and then you will see that if your scaling is wrong, you will land up with something absurd. So if I go with the first one and I say xc is equal to 1 by epsilon, I would get x tilde square plus x tilde, right, minus epsilon equal to 0. This looks perfectly fine, and it seems like I should be able to solve this. But supposing we had done the other, and just to be sure that this is, I mean, there should be only one option coming out of this, right? So if I had chosen to set this equal to 1, or to keep this, to get xc from this term, I would then say, which is equivalent. So when I say get xc from this term, I mean, the question is this x tilde square going to balance this term? These are the two terms that are balancing each other to go to 0, and this is smaller than them, which is what is suggested by this final scale form. Or does this term have to, the x tilde square term, have to balance the third term, and the second one is what becomes small and insignificant? Well, if it's the second case, then these two terms are balancing, and I can say xc, therefore, I mean, this thing has to go to 1 because the coefficient of x tilde is 1, is 1 by square root of epsilon. But if I do this, you see the equation becomes x tilde square plus x tilde by square root of epsilon minus 1 equal to 0. And you see, now I have a problem, because as epsilon gets small, this term becomes large, and it will dominate everything, and it will just tell me that x tilde is 0, which I cannot accept, right? So basically, and you can see this doesn't make sense, because I had obtained the scaling 1 by square root of epsilon by saying that the first and third terms are the leading order terms that balance each other. The middle term is small. But the outcome of that scaling is exactly telling me the opposite. So this scaling is wrong. What actually happens is that the first two terms must balance, when you are looking at the singular root. And so then the correct scale is that xc goes as 1 over epsilon is the scale of the singular root. And then you get this equation, which is consistent with that statement. So at leading order, these two terms balance, and this is a small correction. So now I can do perturbation on this, and write x tilde as x tilde naught plus epsilon x tilde 1 plus higher order terms. Let's just do the first two. So clearly, if I substitute this inside, I'll just get x tilde naught at leading order. And because x tilde is not 0, because x tilde naught cannot be 0, I'll get x tilde naught is just equal to minus 1. Right? And then I go to the next order. So for that I would have to expand it out. So you would get the first term x tilde square, right, plus epsilon square x tilde 1 square plus 2 epsilon x 1 So x naught tilde square of course is 0th order, and I'd already, let me write it out anyway. Okay, so all of this comes from x tilde square plus again x naught tilde plus epsilon x1 tilde minus epsilon is equal to 0. So at order epsilon, these things cancel each other out because I had just used them in the solution. This thing is of low order, so I don't care about it. So these are the terms that balance, right? So I get 2 times x naught, which is minus 1, times x1 tilde plus x1 tilde minus 1 is equal to 0. So I get 1 minus 2 minus 1. And so the leading solution to my singular solution, which I'd call x2, right, the singular solution, is simply minus 1 by epsilon minus 1 and higher order terms. Why? Because remember x is x tilde times xc, and xc is 1 by epsilon, so x is x tilde by epsilon. So once I have the approximate expression, it's minus 1 minus epsilon by epsilon, which is this. And if you go to the original solution, which I written, from the exact solution, right, you see minus 1 by epsilon minus 1, and then you would have got the higher order terms if we continue that expansion. Right, so we've now seen how we can obtain perturbation approximations to algebraic equations using either the expansion method or the iterative method. We saw a demonstration of how you can use Mathematica to facilitate the obtention of these expansions, especially using the iterative method. And then finally, we also did a singular problem where we saw that sometimes a small parameter multiplies a term which, if dropped, changes the fundamental nature of the solution. And so that means that what we do get from such a situation is just one aspect of the solution. Often you have to rescale the problem to solve for its behavior in a boundary layer, in this case to obtain the second solution of the algebraic equation, to get the full picture of the problem in the limit of the small parameter. So clearly the singular perturbations require some more work, but very often those are the problems that are most interesting. Regular perturbations are more straightforward, as the nature of the problem does not change, and you can directly assume a simple power series expansion and it will just correct the magnitudes of the problems. But the mathematical nature of the problem doesn't change fundamentally, although it's certainly simpler to do the perturbation calculation. We had also seen it right at the beginning, which would now make more sense and might be more clearer to you as far as the procedure goes. We had seen the example of the Dean's vortex flow in a curved channel, where we had started with the full 3D equations. We then said that, okay, the curvature ratio can be taken as a small parameter, and so we got an approximate solution for quote-unquote gently curved channels, and that was done by using regular perturbation, by assuming a perturbation expansion, substituting in the power series, and obtaining PDEs for each level of approximation. And by even solving to just the first order, we could get the circulation patterns and obtain insight in that problem. So now this brings us to the end of this lecture, where we have seen some of the basic techniques applied to the simplest problems. And from now on, we shall progressively consider in both lectures and assignments more complex problems, ODEs, and ultimately PDEs in fluid mechanics. But the basic ideas would remain the same as what you have seen here. Only the techniques will become a little more complex. But as you learn more, things become more familiar, you'll be able to tackle a range of different problems. More importantly, other than just the specific method that can be used for a certain set of problems, the idea behind perturbation, the idea of looking at a complex problem as a deviation about a simpler problem, is something very powerful and useful. You can use it just when you think about problems, right? It's always useful when you're tackling a complex problem to look at it in different simplifying limits. And perturbation gives you a way to go beyond that by actually calculating corrections to those limits. And by stitching together these different things, it often gives you a good picture of what to expect when you're approaching a problem for the first time, and prepares you for going into numerical simulations or more detailed intensive analysis. So with that, I think we'll conclude the lecture today. I thank you for your attention, and we will meet again in the next lecture to apply perturbation methods to a fluid mechanics problem. Thank you.